On Indianapolis this week, trying to expand Indiana's pre-K program and looking for the money to pay for it. New details on the plans from Glenda Ritz and Governor Pence. Then Donald Trump's verbal attacks on a judge born in Indiana.
He's from Indiana.
He's Mexican heritage, and he's very proud of it.
Are the comments enough to sink his campaign? And are Indiana's elected leaders doing enough to denounce those remarks?
From RTV6, Indianapolis this week.
And thank you so much for joining us for Indianapolis this week. No shortage of topics. We'll get to all of them, but we begin by talking about education for thousands of Hoosier children. State School Superintendent Glenda Ritz laid out her Imagine 2020 plan this week, a vision for the next 4 years for the Department of Education. It comes as she also seeks re-election as superintendent. Ritz says the plan focuses on 3 areas, including a student-centered approach and high-quality instruction. A key part, the expansion of Indiana's pre-K program to cover every 4-year-old child statewide. And let's welcome in the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Glenda Ritz. Glenda, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Jason.
Great to see you as always. And let's start with this. Why is statewide pre-K so important for all Hoosier children?
So we are remediating kindergarten students to the tune of $31 million a year. We simply have to have our little ones prepared to enter kindergarten, to have that basic foundation to be sure that they're going to be productive all the way through school. So it's very important from an economic standpoint, really, to be sure that kids are on track the entire time, not coming to our schools not ready and then having to catch up.
You have said the funds are there if the political will is there. Let's start with the funding first. Where are those funds?
Absolutely. So first of all, we've already at the department been able to really get our hands around about $200 million. We think it's going to cost in this first biennium to really ramp up the pre-K to a good level, about $150 million per year. And on a biennium rate, that's really less than 1% of the state's budget. So we've already captured about $200 million. We have about $46 million already in existing programs for pre-K. Then we have about $50 million that we've identified in reversions. Money that's already been allocated for education that we want put right back into education, wanting to go right into that pre-K aspect. And then we have about $66 million that we really feel should be reprioritized, and really are going to take a good deep dive into that. And then really it's about the General Assembly and all of us rolling up our sleeves and what do we need to prioritize, what are the wasted spending that we might have, where are savings that we can ascertain, and where can we go from there.
Your impression so far 2 years into the On My Way pilot program, how has that worked, where it has worked?
So now the pilot program really affects about 1,500 children, and it is a individual approach whereby an individual applies for it and you grant the application or you don't. I'm really talking about a programmatic approach whereby we can move at a very fast clip to be sure that we're opening up the floodgates, so to speak, to anybody that serves and has seats for pre-K quality programs at a level 3 and 4. So you can do that programmatically very quickly. So my goal is that in the state of Indiana we have 289 school districts. I want quality pre-Ks within those school district boundaries. Don't care who runs them as long as they're paths to quality 3 and 4. We would form a coalition at that point, and then funding would go out per child, per seat, and very quickly we could fill the seats up. Then when you put in the federal money on top of that are allocated to both private and federal and schools, then you can offer even more seats for paths to quality 3 and 4. So we really have to be able to do it in a programmatic fashion to really ramp it up quickly.
Governor Pence, of course, has recently said he's in favor of expanding that program now and possibly going to the federal government for funding there. Are you in support of that plan, and why not?
Well, I am always in support of federal funding. So at the department, we've actually written 2 grants to the federal government. One was in 2013 in a race to the top. Indiana did not receive that grant because we did not have the infrastructure for quality pre-K. And so then we applied for a second grant, and as everybody's aware, we did not get to submit that second grant, which was only to states who needed to build infrastructure, quality infrastructure for our kids, to make sure that they've got the learning environments and the health and safety requirements and the curriculum and the quality teachers in place. That's what we mean by infrastructure. And so we didn't get to submit that. It was $80 million of lost revenue that we could have had to really get us on our way. So the governor's pilot that he has right now, really, even if he doubled that, we're talking 3,000 children in the whole state. You know, even if he, quadrupled it, we're not really talking about a lot of children that are going to be served. We have to do it in a programmatic fashion. We have the money. We really do have the money within our budget. It's less than 1% of our state budget, and it's a high priority.
We'll see what happens from this point out. Superintendent Ritz, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Thanks, Jason. We're joined now by Deputy Campaign Manager for Governor Mike Pence, Mark Lauder. Mark, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. Now, the governor now saying that he's interested in seeking federal funding for pre-K. Sent a letter, I know, to the HHS secretary last week expressing that interest. Do we have a sense of how many children could potentially be helped by an expansion, how much it would cost?
Well, it really depends on whether we receive the federal funding, and then also as we're building the 2017 budget. That's really going to be a negotiation with the General Assembly. But the key is that Governor Pence, after being the first governor to get statewide pre-K or a state-approved pre-K program through the General Assembly, now we're in this step where we're going to go ahead and start expanding it. We need to make sure we had the capacity. Now we have some data in terms of the pilot program, and it makes sense as we're building that 2017 budget to look to expand the program even further. And those are the steps that Governor Pence is taking as we look to private funding, state funding, and then again federal funding if that comes through.
The interest in federal funding is a change in course from where we were 2 years ago. The governor had declined to apply for that federal grant. Should he have done it at that time?
Well, and the governor and the legislature reached an agreement where they were going to do the pilot program. They wanted to make sure that we would walk before we ran. We needed to see if we had the capacity. We needed to go through and test this program, see if we could get the kids involved, get them engaged, and then you would expand the program after that. So the program has been in place for 2 years. It's the first ever statewide state-approved program. And now that we've got those lessons under, we can now move it forward.
How do you respond to Superintendent Glenda Ritz's criticism that Indiana is years behind as a result?
Well, I would say that Governor Pence was the first governor to be able to get a pre-K program approved by the General Assembly, and we are now making our steps at growing that program. And we're doing it in a responsible fashion. So we wanted to make sure that we had the capacity, we had the issues worked out when we launched this program, and now we're able to move forward and make sure that more kids have access to it as the state expands this program out even further.
Will the focus on low-income children specifically be enough?
Well, I think most of the research shows that the pre-K programs have the biggest impact when you're targeting children who are facing the most difficult circumstances in life. So that's really where the focus has been, is to make sure that we get those kids who need to get a head start before they get into kindergarten, provide them the access so they can then engage in those programs and enter kindergarten ready to go. And I think what we've seen is that we still have a need in that area, and that's where we're going to focus our attention, and Governor Pence is going to make sure that we're still focusing on those kids who are most in need as we grow the program even further.
Ritz is calling for expanded publicly funded pre-K for all children statewide who would like to be a part of it. How do you respond to that? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's something that's going to have to be debated in the General Assembly and through the budgeting process. But again, this program, all the research has shown that it has the biggest impact when you're targeting kids who are coming from the most disadvantaged circumstances. In fact, nearly 3/4 of the states that have state programs target their programs to low income and those children in poverty. So it's a responsible step forward, and I think that's what we need to focus on, is how do we grow the program and provide more access to children in a responsible fashion, rather than just go with blanket statewide coverage where you might not be getting the best benefit for the very high dollar cost that would be required.
Our thanks to you both. Still to come here, Donald Trump faced incredible backlash all week from both Democrats and Republicans following his comments about the Indiana-born judge in the Trump University lawsuit. Now the question, has the backlash been enough? That's next on Indianapolis This Week, only on RTV6. And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week as we turn again to presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump and the firestorm over his comments about the Indiana-born judge hearing the Trump University lawsuit. This week, Republicans in Indiana and across the country lined up to denounce his comments about the judge's Mexican heritage. Many, including House Speaker Paul Ryan, went so far as to call the remarks the definition of racist. Governor Mike Pence told us Trump's comments are inappropriate.
Every American's entitled to a fair trial and an impartial judge, but of course I think those comments were inappropriate. I don't think it's ever appropriate to question the partiality of a judge based on their ethnic background. But that being said, you know, if I wanted to comment on everything that's said in the presidential campaigns, I would have run for president.
Senator Dan Coates and Congresswoman Susan Brooks also called the comments inappropriate. Then, appearing on C-SPAN, Indiana Republican Luke Messer said there's no evidence that Donald Trump is a racist.
But his comments were inappropriate, and they were using the race card, and we need to speak out against that. I think one of the real unknowns of the upcoming campaign season is Donald Trump really have some sort of strange personal tic where he can't control his comments? Or is he an adult? Is he a leader? Is he somebody who can control his tongue and focus on the real challenges of the American people?
And we're joined this morning by Barron Hill. Barron, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here.
Great to see you. You were critical over the past few days of Governor Pence and his response to Donald Trump's comments about Judge Gonzalo Curiel. Talk about that a little bit. You didn't feel that Pence came out strong enough against those comments.
Some people might consider that to be kind of a petty comment, but I don't think it's petty at all. Let me tell you why, Jason. There's something going on in this presidential election that is disturbing. You have Donald Trump, who's the Republican nominee, that are saying some pretty awful things about people. In this particular case, Judge Curiel, he criticized him for being a Mexican. Now, can you imagine a presidential nominee criticizing somebody because he's a Mexican? Well, he was born right here in Indiana, as we know. He went to Indiana University and Indiana University Law School. He's an American. And for Donald Trump to be saying those kinds of things about someone who is an American is not only not presidential, it is wrong. It's not who we are as Americans. It's not who we are as Hoosiers.
If Donald Trump were to apologize for those comments, can we move on from that discussion, or will that continue to last through November?
No. If he apologizes, I think that's the end of it. He's made a mistake, and then it's over. But he's not done that yet.
Let's talk about this proposal for debates and town halls. You're calling for 9 events with Republican Senate candidate Todd Young, 4 moderated debates, 5 town halls. Why that number?
It gives the opportunity for constituents in each congressional district to hear us. And, you know, I think this is important because people are bombarded with television commercials, and you watch the news many times, but having the ability to directly interact with the candidates and ask questions among constituents, I think, is a good idea.
Where do you think you are in the race right now with Todd Young?
Well, it's early. We're, entering the summer months, and we're campaigning very hard. But I think most people pay attention in September and October, right after Labor Day. So I feel good about where I am right now, and I'm looking forward to the campaign.
He had gone through a vigorous primary, of course, with Marlin Stutzman, a lot of name recognition for those who might not have known him ahead of time. You didn't have a primary. You don't get that benefit. Is that a plus for you, or is that a drawback that you didn't have to go through a primary?
Well, it's a plus in light of the fact that I didn't have to spend resources. It's a negative in terms of raising your name recognition, but that'll all come about as we get into the guts of the campaign.
What do you think the biggest issue is facing Hoosiers right now?
The economy, jobs. I think it's important that we look at what has happened in the last 7.5 years. Our economy has gotten stronger in the last 7.5 years. Most people, a lot of people that I talk to, have forgotten that 7.5 years ago we were staring into the economic abyss with the biggest recession that we've had since the Great Depression. And I can remember I was in Congress at that particular time, was called back to Washington on an emergency basis right after the election to address the whole issue of the economy. And economists from all over the country were telling us that if we did not act in Congress by passing certain legislation like the stimulus package and saving the automobile industry and cash for clunkers, if you recall that, then we were going to be looking at a depression like we had in 1932. So we have come a long way because we passed those kinds of things that stopped the bleeding on the economy. But, Jason, what's not recovered completely are wages. And, I give credit to Bernie Sanders for pointing this out. While the economy's come back, the stock market has come back, jobs have been created in the country, a lot of the wages are stagnating still, and we need to focus like a laser beam on making sure that we get those wages up.
Barron Hill, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you as always.
Thank you very much.
We also spoke to Republican Todd Young's campaign. They issued a statement saying after 8 years of the failed Obama-Clinton policy agenda, Hoosiers are facing a very serious set of challenges. Our campaign is focused on economic and national security solutions that will move our country forward. and Mr. Trump should do likewise instead of making highly inappropriate remarks about a judge's ethnicity. Our political insiders are standing by to talk about Trump and what this latest controversy means for the entire Republican Party. Kip 2 and Marcus Barlow set to join me next on Indianapolis This Week, only on RTV6. And welcome back as we welcome in Republican strategist Marcus Barlow and former state Democratic Party chairman, of course, Kip 2. Good morning, guys. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Good to be seen. Let's talk about the Republican response to Donald Trump this week. Marcus, was it enough from state Republicans?
I think it was. I mean, I think every single Republican has to decide, and unfortunately this is going to happen throughout this presidential race. They're going to be forced to answer to what Donald Trump has said. And, you know, unfortunately, Democrats don't get asked that same thing. I mean, you don't see John Gregg walking around having to talk about Hillary Clinton's plans on coal and to raise Indiana electric prices and kill our manufacturing business. But Donald Trump is such a large, imposing figure that Republicans are required to. And I thought, you know, what the governor said, what Senator Young said, I think that what Republicans are saying is the right thing. They're saying the right tone.
But this has been a little different than an issue response, right, Kip?
Well, yeah, I mean, John Gregg does not have to sit there and defend a racist. That's true. And so I think the difference here is between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are pretty stark. Donald Trump has engaged in racist rhetoric. The very top of the Republican Party has admitted to it. The Speaker of the House of Representatives said it's classic racism. I think most Republicans I know are embarrassed by their candidate. They just can't say it publicly because they're afraid of retribution, I guess. I don't know what it is, but it is a bad moment in American history that a major American party has a racist openly running for president of the United States on their ticket. And I think all good Republicans ought to do what they ought to do and say, to heck with this guy. And I don't think enough has been done.
And I think that's what we've seen. We saw the response from the governor, from Todd Young, saying that these comments are inappropriate, and you saw from the Speaker of the House saying that these comments are inappropriate. And I think we are going to see each individual Republican have to come out and say exactly where they stand on these different things that Donald Trump has said.
Let's move on now and turn to the race for governor and the Republican Governors Association jumping into the mix now. A huge ad buy supporting Mike Pence and attacking John Gregg's record as Speaker and after leaving office. We asked Pence spokesperson Mark Water about that as well.
John Gregg has said that the election will be about Mike Pence's record, and he is half right. It is also about his record. I mean, John Gregg, as Speaker of the House and one of the most powerful politicians in the state of Indiana, turned our record deficit into a record, or a surplus into a record deficit. He was a lobbyist. He did work for, scandal-plagued Enron. Those are facts that people need to remember and to understand when they're making the choice this fall.
And I've got a feeling this debate could get fun. Kip, let's start with you. Your response to the ad, your thoughts about the ad, and just the Republican Governors Association getting into the mix at this point.
Well, first of all, there's no difference between the Republican Governors Association and the Mike Pence campaign. They've put $1 million into his campaign directly, and they're paying for this ad. I know the governor was attempting to say, well, it's not me doing negative, because he made a promise long ago after a campaign where he was very negative. He said the biggest thing he's learned in politics is he shouldn't be negative. Well, apparently he's unlearned the lesson, because he fired the first shot. It's a negative campaign commercial. It's a kind of commercial you wouldn't see until usually October in a campaign, and it shows complete desperation on the governor's part. He knows how much trouble he's in. That 36% job approval rating is the only way he's going to win is if he drags John Gregg way down into the mud, and that's what you're seeing. And it's freaking June, and we're already doing it.
Marcus?
Well, obviously I disagree. I mean, I think that, if we want to talk about polling, Governor Pence is also in the lead in the latest polls. And at the same time, I mean, John Gregg's walking around the state, and I think Mark said it, wanting to talk about records. Well, let's talk about records. Let's talk about John Gregg's record when he was in office. Let's talk about his record when he wasn't in office. What did he do after he left as Speaker of the House? And I think all of that's fair game. I mean, of course, you want to paint it as negative. I paint it as this is what he did. I mean, no one's lying about his record. This is exactly what...
Well, actually, there are several inaccuracies in the ad, so I don't agree with that.
I mean, his own book. In his own book, he talked about it.
Governing Magazine gave him and Brian Bosma an award for being Legislators of the Year for coming together for tax reform. He was an outstanding public servant the entire time he was Speaker. He's been a university president. He's been an outstanding person his entire time, and you guys are trying to drag him down because your governor is in deep trouble.
I don't think we're dragging him down. He did turn $1 billion surplus into a deficit. He talks about it in his very own book, in his own words. He talks about how former Governor O'Bannon called it a mistake. Well, I mean, if Democrats are going to nominate Mr. Mistake, then they're going to have to defend it.
Does this ad, though, going negative at this point, does this now set the tone for the next few months? Marcus?
I think Democrats set the tone long ago. I mean, this has been the vitriol that's come from the left about Mike Pence. I mean, you guys were putting up attack yard signs months ago. So
actually,
the tone was sent long ago.
Number one, that was organic. There wasn't anybody organized in the Democratic Party.
People weren't painting their own yard signs.
There was some guy who lived on, I believe, Washington Boulevard who organically did it himself. This was an organic thing, and Democrats have obviously adopted it. But I think the person who set the tone was the governor when he passed and signed RFRA with a whole bunch of people that looked like they were Taliban members behind him. That's when the thing was
RFRA that was supposedly going to kill job growth, but we've seen more jobs created. We've seen unemployment at an all-time low. We've seen record investment in Indiana. So everything
I dare you to go to every major business person in this city and ask them if they think RFRA was damaging or not.
You want me to talk? I could talk to the owner of Salesforce who increased his investment.
Our debate will continue on Twitter. I promised it would be spirited right now. Thanks to Marcus and Kip. Of course, we'd love for you to follow us on social media as well, at our new Facebook page, and there on Twitter as well, we promise. News and updates every day of the week. We will be right back. So much for joining us for Indianapolis this week. For Rafael Sanchez, Katie Hines, and our entire team, have a fantastic week.